This story was sent to us from Yesenia in California. This story happened to me about 10 years ago when I was 14 years old. I was born in San Diego, but sent to live with my grandmother in Mexico when I was 3 years old. My mother had passed away and my father had abandoned me and my mother when I was a baby. I lived with my grandmother in a small town not too far from the US border. As a child, my grandmother tried to shelter me from everything. She rarely let me out of her sight. When I was about 14, I went to a party with my cousin who we will call Anna. I had to beg my grandmother to go to the party. I was so happy that she said yes because this would be my first time going to a party without an adult. Anna and I arrived at the party and there were a lot of other people in our age group there. Also there were some guys who were friends with the older brother of the birthday boy. One of the older guys kept looking at me and smiling. He was in his 20s. He approached me after about 30 minutes telling me how beautiful I was. I was very shy and nervous because he was so old. I told him thank you and walked away. Before the party ended, he approached me again and asked for my phone number, and I told him that I didn't have a cell phone. While he was talking to me, a fight broke out at the party with some of the older guys, and he pulled out a knife and stabbed one of the guys. I was so scared, I stood there frozen. My cousin grabbed my hand, and we ran out of the party along with some of the other kids. We ran back to my grandmother's house, and when she asked how the party was, we told her it was good. I didn't want to tell her the truth because I was afraid she would never let me go out again. About 2 weeks after the party, my grandmother sent me to the store to buy something, and I saw the same guy from the party. He walked over to me smiling and said, "Hey, I got something for you." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small cell phone. I looked at it and he said, "Here, take it." I didn't want to take it, but he insisted, so I did. "Well, I don't have any money to pay for this," I told him. He laughed at me and said I could pay him in kisses. I was so grossed out, I reached out my hand to give him the phone, but he wouldn't take it. He walked out of the store and rode away on his motorbike. The store owner told me I need to be careful with that guy. I walked out of the store, and before I could make it to my house, the phone rang and I answered. It was the same guy telling me how much he loved me and wanted to marry me. I told him I was only 14 and he told me age was just a number. When I finally made it home to my grandmother's house, he was standing there in front of the house. He just looked at me and smiled without saying a word, and then he left. He called me every day for the next week saying the same thing and demanding that I go out with him. I decided to end it all by simply throwing the phone away. Throwing the phone away only made him more aggressive. He began showing up to my school and I would see him standing outside of the classroom. When I would walk from school, he would always be right there watching me. One day my grandmother sent me to the store again and I was so scared, I brought a small knife in my pocket. When I walked out of the store, he was standing right there, and he grabbed me and tried to pull me into a parked car. I reached into my pocket for the knife and stabbed his hand. He let me go and I ran home. I was so scared, I broke down and told my grandmother everything. Later that day he showed up at my house with a group of guys and told my grandmother that if I didn't marry him, she would never see me again. My grandmother was a brave lady and she stood up to them and told them no. She recognized a few of the guys from the neighborhood and knew that they were a part of the cartel. They left our house when my dog Chico started barking at them, but one of them pointed his gun at Chico and I screamed. One day I came home from school and my grandma looked really sad. She told me that the guys came back and stole Chico. They told her that if she wanted to see Chico again, she would have to exchange me for him. We didn't know what to do, so we called the priest at our church, and he prayed with us. Before he left our house, he told my grandmother, "You have to get her far away from here. They are not going to stop until they have her." A week later, my grandmother called her best friend who lived in Texas. She asked her if I could stay with her for a few months until things calmed down. Her friend agreed, and I went to stay with her. I was so sad leaving my grandmother alone, especially when she would call and tell me the guys kept harassing her. Unfortunately, the stress was too much for my grandmother, and she ended up passing away from a heart attack. I couldn't even go to my grandmother's funeral because I was so scared about what might happen to me if I went back. Sometimes I remember how badly I wanted to go to that party and can't help but think about how different things would have been if I had just stayed home.